The morning felt like it had been plucked from a dream. Sunlight spilled through the sheer curtains of my bridal suite, casting a golden hue on everything it touched. I stood in front of the mirror, barely recognizing the woman staring back. My dress fit like a whisper, delicate lace brushing against my skin. The venue was everything I'd ever imagined. Soft lights, white peonies, elegant music floating in the air. And today, I was going to marry the man I thought I'd spend forever with. David. Just thinking his name made my heart flutter. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the nerves that danced in my stomach. Not from doubt, no. Just the kind of butterflies you get when everything you've hoped for is finally happening. My vows were folded neatly in my clutch, words I'd written with trembling hands and a full heart. This was it, my moment. And by my side, as always, was Rachel, my sister, my anchor. She looked beautiful too, adjusting my veil like she'd done it 1,000 times. We laughed about old memories, and for a second I felt weightless, like nothing could touch me. Downstairs I could hear the soft hum of excitement, guests arriving, champagne flowing, music warming up. The whole place buzzed with joy. I peeked through the window and saw friends embracing, family toasting, little kids twirling in dress shoes. Everything looked perfect. Everything felt perfect. And as I gripped the bouquet tighter, ready to walk into this new chapter, I had no idea that something was already unraveling behind the scenes. As I made my way toward the ceremony space, the scent of roses mixed with the soft hum of a string quartet wrapped around me like a warm embrace. Every step I took felt surreal. My father met me halfway, eyes a little misty, smiled trembling just enough to make my own eyes sting. He squeezed my hand without saying a word. He didn't have to. That squeeze said everything: pride, love, and maybe even a little bit of letting go. I leaned into it, feeling grounded for just a moment. Then I saw David, standing at the altar, straightening his cufflinks the way he always did when he was nervous. He looked handsome, of course, but more than that, he looked like home. Like every plan we made, every night we dreamed aloud, every quiet coffee in the morning, they were all leading to this. He caught my eye and smiled. Not big, not flashy. Just that soft, knowing smile that had once made me believe we could weather anything. My heart felt full to the point of bursting. The ceremony itself? A blur of smiles, tears, and words that meant more than they sounded. We said our vows, sealed it with a kiss, and the crowd erupted into cheers. It felt like joy was stitched into the air. Rachel was right beside me the whole time, handing me tissues, fixing my train, whispering sweet little reminders to breathe and soak it all in. And I did. I soaked in every second, because in that moment, I believed I had it all. But looking back now, I wish I'd paid more attention to the shadows behind the smiles. The reception kicked off like a dream you don't want to wake up from. People laughed like they hadn't in years. Music filled every corner of the room, and champagne flowed like celebration itself. Everywhere I looked, there were people I loved, clinking glasses, telling stories, dancing without shame. I felt wrapped in a bubble of warmth and wonder, floating through the evening on clouds made of joy. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about tomorrow. I was exactly where I wanted to be. Rachel delivered her maid of honor speech with ease. She spoke about childhood memories, about the closeness we shared, about how she'd always seen David and me as soulmates. People dabbed tears from their eyes, and I smiled through mine. Her words meant the world to me because she knew me better than anyone, or so I thought. When she raised her glass and looked at me with that glowing, sisterly pride, I believed every word. I held on to it. I needed it to be real. At one point, I stood off to the side, just watching it all. Watching the people I loved celebrate what I thought was love. And then, just for a second, I noticed something. A flicker. A glance between Rachel and David. It was brief, but it didn't belong. Not in a moment like this. Something shifted inside me, barely perceptible at first, like a thread pulling loose in a perfect tapestry. I shook it off. I told myself I was imagining things. But deep down, a quiet voice whispered, "Not everything is as it seems." I tried to stay in the moment. Really, I did. I danced, I smiled, I hugged people I hadn't seen in years. But that flicker I saw between Rachel and David, it wouldn't leave me. It lingered like a faint stain on white silk, small enough to ignore, but impossible to forget. Every time I looked over, I caught myself scanning the room for them. They were there, mingling, laughing, blending in with the crowd. But something in my gut told me to pay attention. Then came the moment that changed everything. David had vanished from the dance floor, which didn't seem strange at first. He was probably catching a break, talking to someone, refilling his drink. But when Rachel also disappeared a few minutes later, my stomach clenched. It was subtle, the way they both slipped away, but too close in time to be coincidence. I glanced around, trying not to panic, trying not to create a scene over what could have been nothing. But nothing had never felt so loud. I stepped outside for air, gripping the railing with both hands, breathing deep. The night was cooler now, the laughter behind me muffled by glass. That's when I felt a gentle tap on my shoulder. I turned, and there she was. Jessica, one of my bridesmaids, someone I'd known since college. Her face was pale, her eyes filled with hesitation. "Anna, I didn't know if I should show you this," she said, voice trembling. My heart stopped. She pulled out her phone, and what I saw made my world tilt sideways. It was a photo. Blurry, yes, but unmistakable. David's hand on Rachel's lower back, her face turned toward his in a way no sister-in-law ever should. The timestamp? That morning. The same morning I was getting my makeup done. The same morning I'd called Rachel in to zip my dress. My throat went dry. I stared at the screen, waiting for my brain to come up with some explanation that could make this okay. But nothing came. Just the crushing weight of betrayal crashing into my chest like a freight train. Jessica looked at me like she was afraid I'd shatter right there. I thought maybe it was old, but the nail polish she's wearing, it's the same as today. I noticed it when she gave the toast. My eyes locked onto the screen again. I felt like I was standing outside of my own life, watching someone else's tragedy play out. My sister, my husband, today of all days. My wedding wasn't even over yet, and it was already a lie. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood there, frozen, while the music and laughter drifted out from the ballroom behind me like background noise from a different world. My hands were shaking, but my mind? Sharp. Laser-focused. In that moment, I didn't crumble. I calculated. I saw everything so clearly. If this was going to be the worst day of my life, then they were going to feel it too. I wasn't going to let this betrayal be whispered about in corners. I was going to put it on center stage. I walked back inside like I was sleepwalking, but every step was deliberate. The room hadn't changed. The music still played, glasses still clinked, and people still smiled like nothing had happened. I moved through them, nodding, pretending, performing. But inside, I was rewriting everything. Every memory of David's kisses, Rachel's pep talks, every shared dinner, every inside joke, it all curdled. And suddenly, I wasn't the heartbroken bride anymore. I was something else. I was awake. Back in the bridal suite, I locked the door behind me. The air felt thick with perfume and lies. I stared at myself in the mirror, still in my gown, hair still pinned, makeup still flawless, on the outside. But my eyes, they'd seen too much. I wiped away the fake smile and replaced it with war paint, touched up my lipstick, pressed powder to my cheeks, and fixed every strand of hair that dared fall out of place. If I was going back out there, I was going in with my chin up, and my heart armored. There was no breakdown, no sobbing into a veil, just one clear decision. This day would still be remembered, but for reasons no one expected. I tucked the phone into my clutch, along with the truth it carried. I smoothed the fabric of my dress, walked to the door, and placed my hand on the handle. The celebration wasn't over yet. Not until I gave them something to really toast to. When I stepped back into that ballroom, it felt like stepping onto a stage. No one noticed at first. Just another moment in the blur of a wedding reception, until I picked up my glass and tapped it with the silver knife. The sound rang out, sharp and clean. Conversations stopped. Heads turned. The DJ cut the music. And just like that, I had everyone's attention. All those eyes, friends, family, colleagues, looking at me with anticipation, waiting for something sweet and sentimental. I took a breath, my heart thudding in rhythm with the silence. But I didn't tremble. Not anymore. I looked out across the room and found their faces, Rachel's, caught mid-laugh, and David's, already starting to sense something was off. I held my glass up, voice steady. "I want to thank you all for being here today," I began. "It means the world to me to be surrounded by the people I love most." A few smiles, a couple of claps. I let the pause hang, just long enough. Especially my sister, and my husband. Because today, they gave me the greatest wedding gift of all, the truth. Gasps, audible gasps. I didn't blink. I didn't look away. I watched the color drain from David's face and Rachel's mouth fall open like she couldn't decide whether to run or lie. People turned to look at them, eyes wide with confusion, then horror. And still, I kept talking, calm, collected, cold, if I had to be. I wasn't here to plead for sympathy. I was here to hand back the lie they'd given me and let them choke on it. I reached into my clutch and pulled out Jessica's phone. Yes, I asked to borrow it. Evidence needs to be visible. "Some of you may have missed the private pre-wedding celebration my sister and my husband had this morning," I said, holding the screen up high. "Don't worry, I didn't miss it." Gasps turned into murmurs, some hands covering mouths, others grabbing at wine glasses a little too fast. I walked toward the nearest table, placed the phone down, and pressed play. A photo, then another, then another. One guest stood, another peeked over a shoulder. Whispers turned into pointed stares. I could feel the energy shift in waves, confusion turning into disbelief, disbelief hardening into disgust. "I always thought betrayal would feel like fire," I said. "Turns out it feels like silence. Like getting ready for your wedding while the two people you trust most are off creating their own little ceremony without you." Rachel took a step forward. "Anna, wait, this isn't what it looks like." Her voice cracked, hands trembling. I met her eyes, and I swear, for the first time in my life, I didn't recognize her. David didn't say a word. He just stood there, pale, frozen, eyes darting between faces like a child caught stealing. I smiled, just a little. Not out of joy, but out of resolve. "Don't worry," I said. "I'm not angry anymore. I'm free. And you? You're welcome to each other." People were frozen in their seats, blinking, processing. I could see my mother shaking her head in disbelief, my aunt whispering prayers under her breath. A few guests had already stood up and walked out, but I didn't stop. I wasn't finished yet. I picked up my champagne flute again, raised it slowly, and let my voice carry. To love, honesty, and starting over. And to learning that sometimes the best thing you can do is let go of what was never really yours. Then I turned, heels clicking on the floor like punctuation marks, and walked toward the towering wedding cake in the center of the room. It was beautiful, layers of vanilla and raspberry, white frosting sculpted like lace. I leaned close to the mic and said, "Congratulations, you two. You can have each other." I took the cake knife in hand, sliced off the biggest piece I could manage, held it up with a smirk, and added, "I'm keeping the cake." The room erupted. Not in cheers, not in outrage, just a stunned collective moment of awe. People didn't know whether to clap or cry. I didn't care. I walked out with my head held high, the sweetness of raspberry on my tongue, and a strange, unexpected calm settling over me. I had just burned it all down. And somehow, it felt like the first real breath I'd taken in years. The moment I stepped outside, the air felt different, sharper, clearer, like I'd walked out of a house full of smoke and finally breathed clean again. I didn't look back, not once. People were calling my name, some in confusion, others maybe out of sympathy, but I just kept walking. There was nothing left for me in that room except broken promises and red wine stains. I got into the car someone had arranged, who I don't even remember, and I shut the door like I was closing a chapter I'd never reread. I didn't cry that night. That surprised me. You'd think after a betrayal like that, after years of building a life, I'd collapse. But there was something strangely empowering about it all. I went home, took off the dress, peeled off the lashes, and stood in front of the mirror again, barefaced, tired but intact. I poured myself a glass of wine, kicked off my heels, and just sat in silence. Not the kind that hurts, the kind that heals, the kind that says, "You survived it. Now what?" The days that followed were chaos. People called, texted, messaged me on social media. Some didn't know what to say. Others said everything. My cousin posted a video from the reception, and it spread faster than I expected. Friends I hadn't heard from in years sent me messages like, "You were incredible, and that took so much strength. I didn't plan to be anyone's inspiration. I just wanted to stop being anyone's fool." I filed for annulment the following week. No hesitation, no back and forth. The paperwork felt cold, clinical. Irreconcilable betrayal wasn't a legal term, but it should have been. David never fought it. He knew. Everyone knew. He didn't reach out, didn't beg, didn't even try to spin the story. Maybe he was too ashamed, or maybe he just knew there was no version of this that could be rewritten. The truth was out, and it had teeth. Rachel didn't vanish like I half expected her to. She stayed, tried to smooth things over with family, but it was like watching someone try to put a shattered vase back together with Scotch tape. My parents were livid. My mother couldn't even look at her. My father said less, but the silence between them spoke volumes. At one point, I overheard him say, "You didn't just betray your sister, Rachel. You embarrassed this entire family." And for once, I didn't feel like I had to defend anyone. Let the consequences come. Their affair fizzled fast. Lust doesn't last when it's exposed to daylight and judgment. I heard through a friend that they stopped seeing each other within a month. No declarations of love, no fairy tale ending. Just two people trying to pretend they hadn't detonated someone else's life for a fling. As for me, I began to breathe again. Not deeply, not all at once, but enough to remember who I was before I started defining myself by someone else's last name. In the quiet that followed, I started building something new. It didn't look dramatic or glamorous. It looked like coffee in the morning without crying. Like walking through the grocery store without feeling like everyone was staring. It looked like slowly learning to laugh again without guilt. I leaned into the people who stood by me. Friends who showed up unannounced with wine and playlists. Family who didn't tiptoe around the topic but held space for my anger and my silence. That kind of support, it saves you. I stopped asking why. I stopped replaying it all in my head. Instead, I began asking myself better questions. What do I want now? Who do I want to be when no one else is writing the script? For years, I dimmed myself to fit into what I thought a good wife looked like. Soft, accommodating, always 2 steps behind David's ambition. But standing in the ruins of that false life, I saw a path I hadn't allowed myself to imagine before. One where I didn't just survive, I created. There's something wild and beautiful about realizing you have nothing left to lose. It frees you. I started drawing again, something I hadn't done since college. I opened an online store. I booked a solo trip. And somewhere in between all that, I looked in the mirror one morning and didn't feel grief or anger. I felt powerful. Like I'd been forged by fire, but I came out gold, not ash. A few months later, I ran into someone at the local farmer's market, an old family friend who had been at the wedding. She stopped mid-step, blinked twice, and said, "Anna, I almost didn't recognize you. You look lighter." I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was true. There was something different about the way I stood, the way I moved. I wasn't dragging grief behind me anymore. I was walking forward, finally. She looked at me with that mix of admiration and curiosity people get when they've seen you rise from wreckage. "I'll never forget what you did that night," she said. "I've never seen someone take back their power like that." Her words hit me harder than I expected. Not because I needed validation, but because I hadn't realized just how far I'd come. Back then, I thought I was just surviving. But in truth, I was rewriting my story. Life had become quieter, simpler, but in all the best ways. I started working part-time at a local gallery, pouring my energy into art and storytelling. I met new people, not rushed, not searching, just open. And somewhere in that calm space, something unexpected happened. I met someone kind. Someone who didn't fill a void, but saw me clearly in mine. It was different this time. Slower. Truer. Like building trust brick by brick, not falling into it blind. What surprised me most wasn't falling in love again. It was realizing I didn't need to. I was whole without it. But when it came, it didn't arrive like fireworks or grand gestures. It came quietly. In the way he listened when I spoke. In how he remembered small things, like how I take my tea, or the fact that I always buy fresh flowers on Sundays. There were no masks between us, no stories we had to sell each other, just honesty. Gentle, steady honesty. He never asked me about my past in a way that felt invasive. But he listened when I told him, when I wanted to tell him. And the first time I did, he didn't flinch. He just reached across the table, took my hand and said, "You deserve so much better." And for the first time, I believed it. Fully. Deeply. Without disclaimers or doubt. Not because he said it, but because I'd already started saying it to myself long before he came along. Healing wasn't linear. There were days I still questioned things. Still woke up with the ghost of a memory I hadn't invited. But those days grew fewer, and when they came, I didn't spiral. I breathed through them. I reminded myself of what I'd rebuilt. I looked around at my quiet little life, with its early mornings and paint-streaked aprons, and I thought, this is peace. Not loud, not showy, but mine. Entirely mine. One afternoon, I passed by a bridal boutique downtown, the same one where Rachel and I had once laughed over tulle and tiaras, dreaming about our futures. Inside, a young woman stood on a pedestal in front of a mirror, veil tucked into her curls, beaming. Her friends clapped. Her mother wiped away tears. I paused at the window, watching her spin, so full of hope, and instead of bitterness, I felt warmth. Not because I wanted to be in her shoes, but because I hoped her story would be different. She caught my eye through the glass, and I smiled. Just a soft, knowing smile. The kind that doesn't need to say much but carries 1,000 pages behind it. I hoped she felt it, that quiet wish for her happiness, her safety, her truth. Then I kept walking. No lingering, no heaviness, just forward. People still ask me if I regret it, if I'd take any of it back. And honestly, I wouldn't. Because while it wasn't the wedding I expected, it was the awakening I needed. The day I lost everything was the day I started becoming myself.